We had a good crowd of fellows. I had a good mate for about 3 years, and then I moved on to the river tram service, which was the senior route. Actually, it took an hour to do the complete round, so it was less boring than the poor fellows who did the Maxton route, which was 10 minutes up, 10 minutes down. So they did 3 trips to my 1. But we all met at Worthington Street, top of Penchester, and linked up there. But I had a lot of memories. Made a lot of friends. You knew everybody, particularly when you were on the river route. You were part of the village, because it was a village in those days, with the sleeper track in between, and you knew all the girls there. And but it was an interesting, one of the things you had to know was all the councillors, because it was a borough council train service, and you didn't have to misbehave yourself with when any of the councillors were about. So that was your first job, to learn them. Another thing was to be able to flex your legs when the tram, was going along, because it tended to sway a little bit, so you had to let your knees go a little bit. After a time, you were quite good at it. It wasn't quite so good on the top, when you got a bit of an old tram and it rocked a bit up on the top. But one of the other things about trams, of course, when you got to the terminus, you had to swing the pole round and put it on the other wire. And I know one day one of the fellows put it on the wrong wire and knocked all the poles off that was coming his way. But fortunately, somebody chased him on a bike and stopped him before he got to the market square. The gauge was 3'6", so it wasn't very wide, and there is still a little bit of track reserved down off Snargate Street by the new road. But we had about 20 trams altogether. It did get up to about 28, but some dropped out. So there was originally 10 bought in 1897, and then in 1905 they managed to get the route through to River, linked up River, and I bought another 5 or 6 trams in, so it built up. But after the First World War, they actually bought 3 new trams and improved things quite a bit. They were all open top ones, which were used on the river route, because see, the river route was difficult because the railway bridge going from the main London road was rounded arch, and you couldn't have had a covered top on that. Of course, one of the things that did happen was in 1917, when staff was very difficult to obtain, they employed one driver who had been invalided out of the army with shell shock, and he was trained up and he appeared to be quite good at it, but he was put on the river route, which seemed a bit strange. And on a Sunday, all the soldiers were taking their girls out to River, so the tram coming up town was fully loaded, and they decided not to stop at the top of the hill before it went down into River. But of course, instead of him stopping and applying the brakes, he went over the top with the controller, or the throttle, as you would think on a car, fully open. And of course, when it got to the bottom, it crashed. And of course, there was about 10, 11 people killed and about 40 or 50 injured. And it was like a battlefield there. But as I say, one of the soldiers on the tram tried to stop it. He tried to, but of course, as the controller was fully open, he couldn't do anything about it, because the emergency brake wouldn't work unless, because if you'd used the emergency brake, you'd have brought it up like almost hitting a brick wall. Because I remember just before this last war, or somewhere about 35, 36, we were going round into the Pier District area, and the tram came to an absolute terrific stop, like in a brick wall. And my mate told me afterwards, he said that one of the wrens was coming out the side turning, and she saw me, shut her eyes and put her foot down and went across the front of him. Well, she was lucky to get by, but as I say, I came up to, you know, I was nearly shot from one end of the tram to the other. But there we are, you know, we had some good fun. We had outings, we had a concert party, we had a rifle club, we had a football team, and, you know, there was quite a nice spirit, you know, community spirit amongst the fellows. But talking about turning the pole, you know, which had to be done I was putting it on one day when we was blowing a gale down at the pier. My hat blew off, rolled out into the dock, and of course someone supplied me with a sou'wester to keep me dry, and later when I came back on the next trip, they presented me with my hat. It had been in the dock, someone had put it in the oven, where I normally wore 7 1/4, it was now 6 7/8. So that was the end of that hat. But another turning the pole at Buckland, I was in a bit of a hurry because I wanted to use the toilet, and because I grabbed the pole, swung it round hard, put it on the other wire and was gone. My mate came out and he said, "Now you've got to go and apologise to the poor old pilot, the retired pilot, who's got a nice bowler hat which you pushed down over his ears." He was not very pleased, so I was a bit worried about my job then, so I went and said to him, "I'm very, very sorry, sir, I didn't know," but he said, "Well, you must be more careful, Sonny." So I learnt my lesson. It was gradually being run down. They weren't going to spend any money. For one thing, the trams did make money in the early days, very cheap fares and very well used, but they never put any money by for, you know, for deterioration and the need to buy new vehicles and, you know, and repair the track. So gradually got more and more run down. And of course, the end of 36, it was a real struggle to keep going, but we had a very good engineer who was, you know, really kept the trams on the road. There was no getting away from that. And so when the end came, they trained up all the drivers who were capable of driving buses, and us who were conductors who hadn't reached the grade of driving were taken over if we were 18, because if you were under 18 you couldn't hold a public service vehicle licence. You could conduct a tram, but you couldn't conduct a bus. So that was, we went over. I had learnt to drive in 36, fortunately, and soon after that I asked if I could do some driving, and they gave us a chance to do it, and they gave us runs round, and they said, "Well, you're all pretty good, we'll put in for your test." Well, the test came through very quickly, and the boss said to me, he said, "Have you done any reversing, Joe?" I said, "No, not yet." He said, "Well, the test's on Monday, and this is Saturday. You'll have to come in on Sunday and back the buses round the garage. And don't do any damage," but I learned how to back a bus. I passed my test first time next morning. So that was one of my bits of luck, you know, actually. But of course, we think back to if the trams had survived when the war broke out and bombing and shelling took place, well, we would have had great difficulty in keeping things going, because I know some towns and cities, they lost their trams in one night because they just couldn't cope with the damage. We kept all the main routes going. The town service were perhaps a little reduced, but all the country services, you know, which were involved with it, were still being run to Canterbury, to Alvington, to Folkestone, Deal. They all continued, and even some of the London service was still kept running. But of course there wasn't the need for it, but a lot of our work in the early days was working for the military and the Navy. We of course didn't get too much involved with Dunkirk because the railways did the major part of the work. They landed them at the Admiralty Pier and put them on a train as quickly as possible, got them out of the town and fed them on the way up. Western Anger, Paddock Wood, Headcorn, places like that. and we only got involved with various things with the Navy. One job I well remember, I was just knocking off at 10:30 and they said, well, you're off to Chatham now, and we got the bus just down, about 3 of us I think, and we had a load of Royal Marines who'd actually been smashing up Boulogne docks. They'd been wrecking it, so there was nothing there for the Jerrys when they came, and they were quite a lively crowd. I think they well had their ration of rum, and they were pretty lively, and of course we got them up to Chatham, and I lost my mates. I thought, well, I'll get cracking back to Dover, and I just arrived in Dover about 5:15 in the morning. I was feeling a bit weary, and I suddenly woke up to the fact that I was heading straight for a house, yanked the steering round and managed to get it into the garage. But I was dead lucky because when they swept the bus out, I found thunder flashes and live rounds of ammunition, so if I'd had a crash, I was rather fancy I shouldn't be here now. We started a Home Guard unit. It was what they called as a transport column for the Home Guard, and they found out that I was quite good at map reading, and this goes back to my scouting days. I'd always keen on map reading, and I'd found my way around, and the boss said, well, as you're good at map reading, you can go on this course this weekend. So we went up to Aylesford and joined an Army Service Corps unit and went on an exercise. Well, when we came back, I saw a newspaper and said the garage in the Kent area, or East Kent area, has been bombed and there's casualties. So I thought, well, I'll take a chance. I'll nip down to the village and ring a number which I knew by heart. And they said, oh, you ring back later on. And of course it turned out that the garage had been bombed that night, and 10 of our fellows had been killed and others injured. And of course it happened at 10:15, and I would have been on 2 to 10 shift. And the actual fella that did my shift, was killed. So it looks as though I was a lucky man again, thanks to my map reading.